Welcome to this course on being an inspirational leader. Now that sounds like quite a big ask, doesn't it? But you really can learn this. There are simple things you can do in order to be a really great boss, much more than just a manager. So the difference between management and leadership is really that leadership's about providing a vision and then motivating people to move towards that vision, making them want to help achieve the vision. And that's what we're going to be looking at. Now, some of the great leaders in history have been quite charismatic, and you can't learn charisma. But the great thing is that for most of us who are just in charge of people at work, who just have ended up as a boss, the good news is we don't need charisma. We can learn to be motivational. There are 25 things you can do in order to be a really motivational manager, a motivational leader. And I'm going to tell you about those 25 things on this course. So my name's Chris Croft. I've been training people on management training courses for years now, more than 20 years. Before that, I was a manager of quite a few people. I've come from a background of running factories where I've had a lot of people working for me. But I think the main place where I've learnt this stuff wasn't when I was doing it, and it wasn't from books. It's been from looking at managers I've had. I've had a few great bosses and quite a few really bad bosses. And I've been thinking about this subject of motivation for all of that time. So I've compiled my top 25 easy things that you can do in order to be a motivational boss. So let's get started. Motivation is vital, and it would ideally be really great motivation, which we could perhaps call inspiration. If you've got people who are just going through the motions, just doing what they're told in order to get paid, they're never going to be great. They're never going to beat the competition, and they're never going to really enjoy their work. And I think good motivation is sadly lacking in most organizations. Most bosses that I see, and the ones that I've worked for in the past, seem to use power and coercion, or they just give out commands. And if you're a boss, why do more than that if you know that people have to do what you tell them? And some bosses are just plain absent most of the time. You hardly see them unless you're in trouble. And other bosses seem to think that their job is just to keep you in line, or to criticize you when you do things wrong, or just to check on you. But these bosses are missing out on so much because their people could do so much more if they cared, if they were fired up, if they were inspired. So inspirational leadership or management is really, really important, and you can learn it. So if you look at the history of management theory, originally there was something called trait theory. It's now been mostly discredited, but the idea was that you would look at the famous leaders of history and the successful leaders in your organization, and you would work out what the best ones do. In fact, this was originally done in the army. They looked at all their most successful leaders and they looked at what qualities they had. But the problem they found, and this is obvious as soon as you think about famous leaders, Gandhi versus Genghis Khan or whatever, there were a huge variety of great leaders, and they found that there wasn't really much in common that they had. And even if you could find what these leaders have in common, people can't change, or they can't change a lot. They can't change their personality, really. So it wouldn't even be useful if you could identify the personal characteristics of great leaders. So trait theory has faded, really. And we've realized there are lots of different ways to do a job. I think the good news for us mere mortals is that charisma isn't needed in order to be a great manager, a great boss, a great leader. And that's a relief because we can't learn charisma. The great thing is there are simple things you can do, which of course I'm going to go through during this course. So trait theory was replaced by something called transactional leadership, which I think is much better. And transactional leadership says it's what you do that counts. There are simple things that work, like communicating with people, giving them clear goals, focusing on the positive, thanking them. And these are all the things we're going to go through during this course. It's all easy stuff that you can do, and yet so few bosses do it, which is great because there's a real opportunity here to be better than the average. In fact, to be one of the best bosses out there. So if you do what I'm going to cover on this course, you'll be right up there with the best. The inspirational leader is both a leader and a manager. And I think most bosses need to do both. They need to be both. So what's the difference between a leader and a manager? Leadership is more about vision, and it's more about communication and motivation. Whereas management is more about organization and planning and control. So leaders have to do a certain amount of planning and organizing, and managers have to do a certain amount of motivating. And ideally, you would do all of those. You'd be great at both. So if you're a manager, you do need to be a leader as well. And in this course, we're going to look at the leadership side of things, particularly at motivation, which I would include communication as part of motivation. But we will also cover the vision side of things briefly, and we're going to get to that in the next video. So you can learn to be both. You can learn to be a leader and a manager at the same time.